Welcome to the deep dive. We take the sources you send us and we turn them into knowledge you can actually use fast.
And today, we're going after the big two.
The absolute bedrock of business finance, variable costs and fixed costs. We're going way past the textbook definitions here.
Oh, absolutely.
The mission is to give you a framework to really understand where your business creates its advantage, or, where it's losing control.
And look, we've gone through all the material, the case studies, the applications, and there is one central idea that ties this entire thing together. It's something people almost always ignore.
Okay.
It's the relevant range.
The relevant range. Okay, that's an immediate gut punch. Why start there? If we're trying to master both cost types, why is that one idea, the range, the absolute key?
Because if you don't ground your analysis in the relevant range, your plans, your forecasts,
Yeah.
they're all built on models that are, well, fundamentally wrong.
So you're saying you can't just assume a cost behaves the same way forever.
Exactly. That range is the specific zone of activity where your assumptions are actually true. The moment you scale up, or even shrink outside of that range,
Everything changes.
everything changes instantly. Your standard accounting model just breaks. We're going to keep coming back to this because it's the key to not making a catastrophic mistake when you grow.
That makes perfect sense. It's about acknowledging the real world's chaos, not just the neat lines on a graph. Okay, let's start with the moving target then. Variable costs. So let's nail the definition down quickly. Variable costs, or VC, change in total directly with your activity.
You make more, you spend more.
Right. Double the product, double the total cost. But, and this is so critical for pricing, the cost stays constant per unit.
And that per unit number, it's deceptively simple.
Okay.
It also carries a huge amount of risk.
Let's use that hamburger example.
Perfect. So the meat for one burger patty is, say, 50 cents.
Okay.
If you make one burger, it's 50 cents. If you make 1,000 burgers, your total meat cost is $500.
Yeah.
But the cost for each one is still 50 cents. That constant is what lets you plan.
So if you're graphing this, it's a straight line, right? Starts at 0.
Yep, 0 units, 0 cost.
And the slope of that line, how steep it is, that's your variable cost per unit. Like the $150 raw material cost for the car parts we saw in the source.
And here's the crucial application. This isn't just bookkeeping. That VC per unit defines your absolute non-negotiable price floor.
The floor.
The absolute floor. If you're thinking about a special one-time order, a discount, anything, your price has to cover that variable cost. If your meat is 50 cents and you sell the burger for 49 cents,
You're losing money on every single sale. Guaranteed.
you're guaranteeing a loss.
And it's not just raw materials. We see this everywhere, right? In retail, it's the cost of goods sold. For service firms, it might be sales commissions.
Exactly. The cost is tied directly to the activity that makes you money. So if your supplier suddenly jacks up the price of that raw material by just 10 cents,
That 10 cents hits your bottom line on every single unit. It can wipe out your entire margin instantly.
that's it. Variable cost is your engine, but they're also your most immediate risk. They fluctuate and you feel it right away. Which brings us right back to that critical construct we started with, the relevant range.
Right.
We just said variable costs are this beautiful, straight, linear thing, constant per unit. But that perfect line, it's just an assumption. It's a simplification accountants use to make planning easier.
So we pretend it's a perfect line, but reality has bulk discounts, right? Or maybe even penalties for small orders. The relevant range is the boundary. It's the zone where we can actually trust that straight line assumption.
Precisely. Let's go back to that automotive example, the steering wheels.
Hmm.
Maybe from car 0 to car 10,000, they cost you exactly $150 each, a perfect variable cost.
Okay, that's our range. Lower to 10,000.
That's your range. But the second you sign a contract for car number 10,001, you might trigger a huge volume discount. And that cost per unit suddenly drops to $135.
It didn't slide down smoothly. It just dropped, a step down.
It stepped down, you lift the relevant range, and the whole cost structure changed.
So wait a second. Does that mean that most high-growth companies, like a tech startup that's maybe scaling 60% a quarter, are they basically forced to use models they know are about to be wrong?
They absolutely are. And
Yeah.
that is the great challenge of scaling fast.
Because they're constantly breaking out of their relevant range.
Constantly. Think about it. A cost that's purely variable when you're small, say buying shipping boxes a pallet at a time, it can become something totally different when you're shipping 1,000 units.
What do you mean?
Well, at 1,000 units, you can't just order pallets anymore. You suddenly need a warehouse lease. You need a full-time logistics supervisor on salary.
Ah, and that supervisor's salary. It isn't tied to the number of boxes. It's tied to the capacity you need to handle that volume of boxes.
Exactly. It's a fixed cost. But it only exists within a new, higher relevant range. You hit a certain threshold, and that cost jumps from 0 to, say, $70,000 a year. A variable cost, increase more boxes, just forced you into a massive new fixed cost commitment.
And the original straight line is completely broken.
Completely. It means management has to be constantly reevaluating their cost behaviors. The economics of the business are fundamentally shifting under their feet.
Okay, so if variable costs are this moving target that breaks outside the range, let's pivot to the stable foundation.
Yeah.
The anchor, fixed costs.
Right, FTCs.
Yeah.
These are the costs that stay constant in total, no matter what your activity level is.
Within that magical relevant range, of course.
Always within the relevant range. Let's stick with the hamburger restaurant. The rent is $2,300 a month.
Okay.
You sell 0 burgers, you still pay $2,300. You sell 10,000 burgers.
Still 2,300. It's fixed.
And this is where it gets really powerful. The per unit effect is the opposite of variable costs. The total is flat, but the cost per unit drops like a rock as you produce more.
That's it. If you only sell 1,000 burgers, that rent adds $2.30 to the cost of each burger.
Which is huge.
It's massive. But if you can crank out 10,000 burgers in that same restaurant, suddenly the rent is only contributing 23 cents per burger.
That is the fixed cost paradox. And it's the entire game when it comes to scaling a business.
It really is. It feels risky to take on big fixed commitments. A huge factory, expensive machinery, a big salaried team. But if you can generate the
It
volume,
becomes your single biggest competitive advantage.
the ultimate engine. Economies of scale only happen when you maximize the use of your fixed assets. You spread those big chunky costs over so many units that your per unit cost plummets, and you can just destroy competitors who are operating at a lower volume. So the goal isn't to avoid fixed costs. The goal is to sell enough to make them insignificant on a per unit basis. You're diluting them.
You're using the capacity you paid for. That's the key.
And building on that idea of capacity, let's dig into that special case we mentioned, step fixed costs.
Right.
Because this is where capacity planning gets really, really tricky in the real world. Capacity comes in chunks. You can't lease half a machine. You can't hire 50% of a supervisor.
That ice cream factory example from the sources was perfect for this.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so the cost for supervisors is fixed at, say, $1,000 for 2 supervisors. But that's only true if you're producing between, let's say, 3,001 and 5,000 gallons of ice cream.
That's the relevant range for that cost.
Exactly. The moment you need to produce 5,001 gallons, you have to hire a 3rd supervisor. You jump the step. And your supervision cost instantly goes from $1,000 to $1,500.
So operating at like 4,900 gallons isn't just about being efficient for the day. It's a major strategic decision.
It's a critical management decision. You're maxing out your output just below that capacity cliff to avoid that $500 tax of adding the next layer of overhead.
This whole capacity conversation, it leads right into what has to be the biggest strategic tool here, operating leverage.
The ultimate tool. Operating leverage is really just a measure of how many of your costs are fixed versus how many are variable. It's an amplifier.
An amplifier. So a company with high fixed costs, a big factory, lots of automation, has high operating leverage. What does that actually mean for them?
It means they are living the high-risk, high-reward life.
Okay.
Because those big fixed costs allow for incredibly low per-unit costs when they're running at full steam. So a small percentage increase in sales can lead to a massive amplified jump in profit.
So it's incredible in the good times.
Phenomenal. But here's the other side of that amplification.
The vulnerability.
Those fixed costs, the rent, the salaries, the depreciation, they have to be paid no matter what. So in a downturn, when sales fall even a little bit, their profits just get annihilated because those costs don't shrink.
And the formula, the degree of operating leverage contribution margin divided by net income, that actually quantifies this exact risk. It tells you how much bang for your buck you get on the way up.
And exactly how far you'll fall on the way down.
Yes.
And this is what drives strategy. If you expect high, stable demand, you're an electric utility or something, you deliberately choose high fixed costs to get that leverage.
But if you're in a volatile market, maybe a small consulting firm,
Yeah.
you want high variable costs. You want to outsource, use contractors.
You want maximum flexibility. You avoid those big fixed commitments because you can't guarantee you'll use the capacity. It's a conscious trade-off.
Okay, so this whole analysis really gives us the two key metrics every manager has to live and die by. First, the contribution margin.
Right. Selling price minus your variable cost per unit.
That margin, which is driven entirely by your VCs, that's the cash engine you have left over to pay for everything else.
To pay for all your fixed costs and hopefully have some profit left.
And then the second metric, break-even analysis.
The other side of the coin. Your break-even point is where VC and FC come together. You take your total fixed costs, that's your big commitment, and you divide it by your contribution margin per unit. That's your engine.
And that tells you how many units you have to sell just to survive.
You can't forecast without knowing both of those numbers, period.
Okay, so let's shift to control. It seems like variable costs give you daily chances for improvement, right? Less waste, better
Okay.
negotiation with suppliers.
Continuous improvement, absolutely. But fixed costs are different. Those are long-term commitments. They're locked in. You have to monitor them constantly, especially when you're growing.
So for you, listening right now and managing your own P&L, what are the red flags? What should you be looking for?
There are three big ones. First, if your variable cost per unit starts trending up, that is a direct, undeniable sign that you have a problem. Waste, inefficiency, supply chain issues, something.
Okay, what's number two?
If your total fixed costs are growing faster than your sales, it means you're adding overhead people, leases faster than you're adding revenue. You're killing your own leverage.
And the third one, going back to capacity?
If you are operating way below the minimum level of your relevant range,
Yeah.
you are paying for a huge factory or a big team that you are just not using.
Your fixed costs are being wasted.
Criminally underutilized. And it's ballooning your per unit costs and destroying your competitive edge.
So the framework for a manager every quarter really boils down to what? Three questions.
I think so. First,
Okay.
what is our precise relevant range
Mhm.
and how close are we to a step point where we have to make another big investment? Second, can we strategically convert any fixed costs to variable or vice versa to change our risk profile? And third, and this is the big one, how will this specific cost behave if we actually grow by 20% or shrink by 20%?
Not in a perfect world, but based on your actual contracts.
Based on reality.
So mastering these two cost types really is about mastering your business's future. It's how you price things,
Yeah.
how you evaluate profitability, how you plan for growth.
Absolutely. Just remember the core strategic idea. Fixed costs are your long-term commitments. They set your capacity and your risk profile. You have to choose them very, very carefully.
And variable costs.
Variable costs set your absolute minimum price. They are the floor. You have to use both together if you want to scale safely.
All right, and here's a final thought for you to take away from this deep dive. If fixed costs are your capacity commitments and variable costs set your price floor, how should a company that's growing really fast use that degree of operating leverage formula, the one that amplifies both success and failure, to choose its investment strategy before it has to jump to that next step cost?
Because that foresight, that's the difference between successfully scaling and crashing because your own cost model betrayed you.